This is Rabbi Son, hot takes on news, pop culture, and religion, hosted by Rabbi Patrick, that's me, and my son Javon, who's currently scrolling his phone. Spiritual, irreverent, always fearless, produced by Darshan Yeshiva, and, as someone mentioned to me in the last episode, that is spelled DARSHANYESHIVA.org. We want you to be a student, so join us at Darshan Yeshiva. This episode's going to be about Jewish nose rings. We're going to continue our answering questions on Reddit that no one asked us. This is from a user named Truxel, and this was actually posted fairly recently. So here we go. The Torah mentions women wearing nose rings several times. Were these worn on the wing of the nose or the septum? Most depictions I've seen are worn on the wing, which is also common in other Middle Eastern peoples. However, a passage from Mishle talks about a ring in a pig's snout, so that would be more like a septum ring. Which part of the nose was it?
The other be a question for you.
Yeah, I know, right? Normally you go first. So I think that actually what this user Fluffy White Thing has to say is pretty true. Until someone invents a time machine, we'll probably never know, but it may be either or both. I suspect that depending on the culture that you were in, it would have either been on the wing or like a septum, probably more likely the wing. And I only say that because if you look at other Middle Eastern peoples, like they said, that's a little bit more common. One of the things I like about the fact that we have nose rings in Judaism is that it's an absolute repudiation of a really stupid idea, which is that you can't have piercings. We've always had them. It's like the weirdest, like boomer made up thing that we're not supposed to do that. And it all comes from this sort of thing against tattooing, which is like a whole other thing. But yeah, so there were earrings. In fact, if you talk about earrings in the Torah, it's a way in which enslaved people were branded. So you had that. If you had someone who was going to be manumitted and they decided that they did not want to be manumitted, they wanted to stay with the master, quote unquote, and they wanted to stay with their like wife and kid, let's say, they would go up to the doorpost of the house and they would run a nail through the earlobe and they put in some kind of earring that was like a symbol of, oh, this person is part of this household. So we know that earrings have existed. There are some rabbis that they will say, well, that's why we don't do piercings anymore, because you wouldn't want to wear something that an enslaved person would, or you don't want to cause yourself physical harm that is not part of an identity that you have. Like it's basically, we have a thing that it is a sin to cause unnecessary harm to yourself. So maybe, something like that. Having said that, though, people cause unnecessary harm to themselves all the time. There are videos on Instagram of Orthodox Jewish women in Miami getting Botox. So, and I assume, I've never gotten Botox before, but I assume getting, needles shoved into your face is probably a little painful, have to guess, possibly. So I kind of don't buy all of that stuff. The bigger thing is the tattooing thing. And that's where I have a little bit of expertise because I have, both arms covered. I remember when I first started making Jewish videos that people would see a tattoo that I would have, and then that would be the thing they wanted to talk about. That was 15 years ago, so now no one cares. But the idea with tattooing is that you don't have piercings or markings related to death. So it's actually about gashes. So self-flagellation, things that you would have done, self-mutilation as part of ancient mourning practices. So that's the kind of stuff that, you're sort of not supposed to get into. So I would say to this person, if I had to guess, the nose rings were probably through the wing, also from a sanitation perspective, because I think that it's easier to get one in the wing in terms of like cleanliness and stuff like that. I've known plenty of people who have gotten septum piercings and, industrials and all kinds of other piercings that I'm not going to talk about on a family program that get real gross real fast because they're not taking care of them. So yeah, that would be my guess. So Javon, any thoughts as a Gen Zer on anything related to, piercings, tattoos? I feel like your generation, like, almost doesn't care in some ways. Like, it's not edgy anymore.
I mean, no, but I do want to talk about this whole tying it back to slavery thing.
Yeah.
No one's talking about that. No one is thinking about it like that. No Jewish person is waking up saying, I'm not going to get that, my ears pierced because, that was, a sign of form of enslavement. I mean, like, oh my gosh, like if we do things every day that enslaved people were doing.
Okay.
Like, you understand what I'm saying?
You mean just living daily life?
Yeah. So it's like, should we just do nothing? Like, what do you want? Like, and piercings, let's be honest, ear piercings, they don't hurt. Like, it is not even a painful process.
I don't know. The cartilage ones aren't so fun.
Yeah, because that's cartilage. There's like a thick piece of cartilage. So like a regular ear piercing, just like a boop, and then you're done.
Yeah, that one wasn't bad. The cartilage, was bad. I did not have fun with that one. And I took it out eventually because I was just like, I can't deal with this anymore.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you still got yours.
I mean, sad for you, but, yeah. Then with the tattoo thing, so is things like relating to death, is that what you said?
Yeah, so the origin of the mitzvah of not getting a tattoo is that you don't get gashes or cuts or whatever in relation to the dead. And so what does that mean, right? So this is where the Jewish interpretive tradition is important. So the most base level interpretation is that there's probably some practice that ancient peoples did that the Israelites were commanded not to do related to death, maybe ancestor worship, something like that. There is a Jewish custom of rending your garments. So tearing, guys back in the old days, they would cut their neckties, tearing the bottom of a shirt, let's say. If you go to a Jewish funeral now, they wear these, the mourners wear these buttons that have little ribbons on them, and you can tear the ribbons. So I think that probably is a cultural memory connected to self-flagellation. Because think about cutting a ribbon or tearing a piece of cloth, and then think about it's gross to say, but cutting your skin or tearing your skin. I think that there's probably some connection there. I don't know what it is, but it seems too obvious. But then where you get into actual tattooing, it's basically a debate between two rabbis over several hundred years. One is Rashi and the other is Rambam, Maimonides. And Rashi gives one opinion about what is the problem with tattooing. Rambam gives another opinion, which if I remember correctly, it's kind of almost the opposite logic. So one side of it is, well, it's the cut that's the problem. Another side of it is that the ink in the skin is the problem. And then it's, well, maybe it's okay to do it. If it's an accident, or what if the ink gets on your skin, but it's not permanent, maybe that's fine. And it must be because in India and in the Middle East, you have Jews who, do henna and stuff like that. So the impermanency part is probably what makes that okay. So it's just all of these kind of mixes of things. I've always interpreted in the more ancient understanding, the idea that it's supposed to be not about ancestor worship and grief and things like that. And just generally speaking, I know there are plenty of people that get tattoos when someone dies and things like that. I'm not here to judge that. I think that a lot of the anti-tattooing stuff, it's not just the halakhic, it's not just the religious legal aspect, but it's the cultural memory of the Holocaust and being forcibly tattooed. Now, there's nothing wrong with being forcibly tattooed. That's not a sin. You had nothing to do with it. Also, tattooing is used in radiology, so chemotherapy, stuff like that, and that's also not a problem as well. So if you want to get literal about it, it's the halakhic issue. I tend to take a much more meta approach to these things than I think a lot of people. But so that's my take on it.
I don't know. I don't think you should keep, like, if people want to take something that was harmful and they want to turn it into something else, I think that should be allowed, and not, that constant, like, making them feel bad, about things that happened in the past.
So, like what? How do you mean?
Like you said that during the Holocaust, people were forced to be tattooed.
Yeah.
That's like that. Yes, that's a bad thing, but they should not have to curry over to, like, the new generation.
Well, I mean, ancestral guilt is certainly a thing. There's the joke about, like, tradition is just your ancestors guilt tripping you.
Exactly. So sometimes you can't shackle yourself down by, what the other generation wants to do. That's not how society progresses.
Spoken like a true young person, right? Don't trust anyone over 30.
I didn't say never trust anyone over 30. I think you can listen, take in the advice, and do with it what you will.
Yeah.
Which, you do with any advice.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm only saying that the Holocaust issue is just part of why there's the prejudice, because there are plenty of things or I shouldn't say prejudice, the bias against tattooing, because there are plenty of people who do a lot of other things that are not Jewishly acceptable, but would have this opinion of tattooing. And some of it's generational too. So you think of, like, my mom's age, right? She's 84, an 84-year-old has a different understanding of what tattooing is than a 24-year-old. Right? Or a 44-year-old, even, for that matter. And so I think some of that is just, it's history and it's painful history, and you don't want people doing something that was forced upon others. It just brings up a lot. But, I don't think
it's not your life.
Yeah, it's not your life. And then the other thing I was going to say is, don't, like, I say this to people every once in a while, that don't make a halakhic, don't make a Jewish legal excuse for something that is an emotional, that is like an emotional tie, right? Like, if you're a person who you just think tattoos are terrible and you just don't like them and you feel like Jewish people shouldn't get them, and, just on and on and on and on. If you think that because it is a halakhic, it is a Jewish legal concept, fair, respect it. I get it. You read the text, you made the decision. All right. If you have an aversion to it aesthetically, or if it brings up trauma from the Holocaust, that's a different set of feelings than a Jewish legal one. In other words, if you're, a person who's eating a BLT while judging someone for getting a tattoo and crying about, Jewish law and Jews don't do that and whatever. Okay, well, take a look at yourself there, friend.
Yeah, so I feel like this just sums up to, what every religious argument sums up to: hypocrisy. People love to, cherry pick certain aspects and, and then,
ignore others.
Yeah, and then, like, ready to, like, pounce on, people that they're like, oh, I don't like this certain thing, so I'm gonna, like, make you feel bad. But, speaking for, the youth.
Okay. As you do.
As I do. I think everybody's just not their business, personally.
Yeah.
Like, if something bothers you, then it just bothers you. You don't need to voice that.
Right.
And then you just don't need to voice that, because not your body. It's not
right.
This has nothing to do.
Yeah.
Clearly, when they did that something, whether or not it's a piercing or a tattoo, it was not, thinking about that, because that's not what they wanted it for.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, they don't feel a tie to that. Right. And they don't want to tie themselves down like that.
Right.
Do what you want to do for you, and they'll do what they want to do for them. You are only ever in control of your life.
There's a famous book called Yearnings, and it's this sort of collection of all of these different Jewish, modern Jewish stories. And one is a story about a woman who goes to her rabbi because she's so distraught that her son has gotten this tattoo, right? She's just so upset about it, whatever. Well, the punchline at the end of the story is the tattoo he got was a Star of David, right? So that's just kind of the world we live in, and things are more complicated than you want. And, like, I go back to don't make it a Judaism thing if it's really not a Judaism thing. If it is a Judaism thing and that's your perspective, then gosh, go for it. I respect it, whatever.
Yeah, for you.
Well, right, for them. And then also, though, I do respect that for some people, some of these things are emotional and they are about family and they are about traumas that you've gone through and things like that. And I respect that a person can have those feelings.
Yeah,
for them. Right.
But to make people feel guilty about wanting to live their lives in a certain way, just because you have trauma, you can't project your trauma on someone else.
Right.
Because that's, first of all, it's just like, wow, go to therapy. Or like, take a walk in the woods and like, really do some self-reflecting.
That's called heat badedut.
Yeah.
Go do some heat badedut.
Do some self-reflecting and like, realize that you have some, stuff that you need to deal with and you can't take it on everyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. But to answer Truxell's question, I have no idea. But probably in, the wing. Yeah.
Or just do both.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And that's actually a good question. I don't know if this person is just curious about nose rings or if they're getting a nose ring or whatever. They're just asking a question, right?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to our sponsors at Darshan Yeshiva for making this content possible. Darshan Yeshiva provides beginner-level online Jewish learning, including the very popular Conversion to Judaism program, with sponsoring rabbis and students all over the world. Start your Jewish journey any place, anywhere, and anytime with our conservative, reform, reconstructionist, Jewish renewal, humanistic, and post-denominational rabbi mentors. Become the Jew you always wanted to be with Darshan Yeshiva.